the pleasure of interviewing Lieutenant Colonel Robert W. Hansen, and he's being interviewed for the Armed Forces Heritage Museum. The person doing the interviewing is Chief Larry Lowndes. Chief?
Most of these interviews of veterans, they almost all commonly start in your civilian life. Where were you born and raised?
Well, I was actually born in a little village called Webster, New York, which is outside of Rochester by about 7 or 8 miles. And I attended elementary school and high school in Webster, New York. Graduated from high school in 1947. Worked. I needed to get a job. My dad was working, but they didn't. My family didn't have much money, so. But I was only 17. Anyway, I managed to find a job as a delivery truck driver. And I enlisted in Rochester, and that's when my military career began as a young private in the Army, and went to Jefferson Barracks, Missouri that was the Army Air Force Basic Training Base.
Oh, okay.
And so I was there for about 2.5 months. Had an unusual situation that occurred there where we were living in tents, 6-man tents, and it was in Missouri and it was cold. And one of our tent mates came down with meningitis. And the doctors knew very little about meningitis at that time. Mostly what it did, it scared them. And of course it scared us. What they did was take the other 5 of us, empty out a big 2-story barracks from everybody in there, put us in there, took everything we owned, all the uniforms, the tents, etc., and burned them. A whole bunch of us, I forget how many, 50 or 60 were ordered to Merced, California, which was a new basic training flying training base that was opening at Merced. One question was, does anybody know how to use a typewriter? I took typing in high school, so I raised my hand. Good, okay, you get over there. And I became a payroll clerk. I went over to the personnel office and put in my application for aviation cadet training. Moved from Merced to San Antonio Aviation Cadet Center. I was appointed an aviation cadet. That was a separate distinction at that time. You weren't enlisted, you weren't an officer, you were an aviation cadet. But if you were eliminated from the aviation cadet flying training program, you became an enlisted guy. And fortunately, I managed to get through the training. It was a long training, almost a full year, including pre-flight. And there was primary flying training, basic flying training, and advanced flying training. And each one of those, each phase was at a different base. We moved each time. Like I took my pre-flight training at San Antonio, which is what is now Lackland Air Force Base. And my primary flight training was at Bonham, Texas, which was a civilian field, and I had a civilian instructor. And then from that was about 9 weeks. From there I went to Greenville, Texas, which was a military base for basic flight training in the BT-13. And so I flew that airplane for about 90 hours and finished that successfully. I went to advanced training in multi-engine AT-10 at Ellington Field, and my instructor was a RAF pilot. Graduated from flight training as a second lieutenant, and immediately sent to B-24 transition training at Liberal, Kansas. About 2.5 months there, with about 70 or 80 hours of flying. We needed to get a specific amount of time to be able to graduate and be awarded our rating as as a pilot, U.S. Army Air Force pilot. And that was a great day, 1 October 1943. Pinned on the wings and the bars as a second lieutenant. We were all real happy about that. Now, the Air Force started what they called the Flight Officer Program.
Were you commissioned upon completion of advanced flight training?
Yes.
In the AT-10?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
That
So when you started to fly the B-24, you were already second lieutenant then?
I was a second lieutenant then, yes. That was a big deal. Now I'm a second lieutenant. As a pilot, I was the crew commander. There were 4 officers, all second lieutenants, and 6 enlisted, most of them staff sergeants. Well, 1 or 2 would be tech sergeants.
Cross-country flights, night flying, and formation flying too?
A lot of formation flying. A lot of formation flying. We went at that very slowly and very carefully because our instructors knew that if you didn't have good formation discipline, you could screw up the whole mess.
What was it like to fly the B-24? How did it handle?
I really didn't have any comparison because that was the only 4-engine airplane that I got into. But a lot of people said you can always tell a B-24 pilot by looking at his biceps. Well, it wasn't that hard to fly at all. No, on some training flights, we were dropping training bombs, which were 250-pound bombs that had a white phosphorus trail.
Yeah, sometime you passed through Davis Mountain out in Arizona too.
Well, that's where we started our what we called phase training. That was our combat crew training at Davis Mountain.
You trained as a crew?
Yes, trained as a crew.
No, you picked up a new aircraft.
Yes, we did.
Factory new aircraft.
Factory new, had 4 hours on it.
Oh, well.
So we picked it up. We took possession of that in Topeka, Kansas. The B-24 assembly line was very busy. The airplane that we picked up had been built at Willow Run in Detroit. That's why it had the 4 hours on it to get it from Willow Run to Topeka.
So when you picked up the aircraft, were you immediately consigned to go take it overseas, or did you stay in the States?
Those were our orders. From here, you go to Westover,
Okay.
and then Westover via the North Atlantic to the B-24 depot in England.
Again, I ask, were you the only aircraft in the sky at that time taking the bird over, or did you have company? Were you in formations?
No, we were individual. There were other airplanes that were in the stream, but we were not in formation.
How about that? Did you encounter reasonable weather up on the northern route?
Well, most of it was not very satisfactory, especially going through Iceland and flying. We didn't stop in Greenland, but we left from Labrador, and it was cold. The weather, there was always some icing that you had to be careful with, but we were trained for that. And the primary thought, if you're building up ice, go down, because it's going to be warmer, and this was especially with freezing rain. Freezing rain that came from above, and you didn't want to stay in that. Freezing rain was probably the worst problem that we would have with the airplane. Anti-icing on the wing leading edges were pneumatic tubes. They pulse. What you would do was let the ice build up, maybe whatever you could judge, half inch, 1 inch, and then initiate the pulse, the icing, and that would break off the ice, and you could watch it. The flakes of ice would fly off.
Well, you took this new bird overseas by the northern route. After you passed through Iceland, then your next stop was into England?
Yeah, the next stop was in England, yes.
To deliver the aircraft.
That's right. We delivered the airplane. I forget the exact name of the depot now, but it was on the west coast of England, where they took the generic B-24s and modified them for the mission in the 8th Air Force.
How so?
Well, they added armor plates and the bulletproof glass and things like that, which the airplane didn't have when we delivered it. And the armor plate was, well, I forget, it was probably about a 4 or 5 foot square piece of armor plate that was riveted to the outside of the airplane. On the left side, they're the pilot, and on the right side, they're the co-pilot. That was the extent of our armor plating. Yes, we were assigned an airplane. We flew that airplane for about, I forget, 4 or 5 missions. And for some reason or other, on one mission, they took our co-pilot, Bill Fuquay, second lieutenant, just like the rest of us, and put him with another crew, and then gave me a different co-pilot for that mission. Now, unfortunately, during the formation part of the mission, there were also B-17s in the area, and a squadron of B-17s and a squadron of one of our squadron B-24s shuffled together. It was terrible, and the airplane that my co-pilot was in collided with a B-17, and they both crashed, lost 20 people. We learned that if you're in a cloud, stay in formation with your lead, because then you know where he is, he knows where you are, and even in a cloud, you can see well enough to stay in formation. So it wasn't the best way to do it, but we tried to get out of that weather as quickly as possible, which was kind of difficult in England in the wintertime.
I have here in front of me a map of 8th Air Force bases in England during the war. Were you up here at Horsham at that location up in the northeast?
Right here, where you see Coltishall, right here. Here we are, right here. Here's Horsham, right here.
All right, that was your base.
That was my base, which was a permanent RAF base that had been assigned to the Americans. We were very fortunate because we had good brick buildings and paved streets, paved sidewalks, whereas probably I'd say 75% of the bomber bases and also fighter bases were temporary. And you lived in Quonset huts and either walked in the mud or managed to find a wooden sidewalk to walk with. But anyway, we were when we arrived at Horsham, St. Faith as a crew, we were very pleased to find that this is a permanent base, and we were shown to our dorms, and there was steam heat and walk-in showers, nice and warm.
You ever have any interaction with the RAF, their bases or bomber?
The interaction with the RAF would be usually a diversion. We get back from a mission, and our base would be socked in, and maybe a RAF base 20 or 30 miles away would be available. And that's what we did. We'd always divert to the nearest base that was available, and the RAF always welcomed us. And we were always had very good treatment and very good food and what have you at the RAF bases, and vice versa.
What you described, what it was like on a normal mission, or say normal, just how a mission started
Well,
out.
it starts from the alert time when they alerted you to the mission.
Well, from the time the alert, we were alerted and 2 hours before brief time, time to get up and get breakfast, and then brief from brief time to departure time was usually somewhere between an hour and 2 hours. It would depend on just exactly how many airplanes were involved.
I have something here, I don't know whether you...
I can see through the picture there, that was our, you know what we call this?
Yeah.
Wonder Bread. That was our...
You wondered what he was gonna do, or?
That was our old DRE model assembly airplane. And it was painted like that, so it was easily visible. And on the top, there were 4 fire guns. This airplane would take off probably, about 15 to 30 minutes ahead of the rest of us, and be out in position where we were going to form. And then at the appropriate time, the mission commander would give the direction or the order to right turn or left turn or whichever it would be, and we would be headed out either over the North Sea or down towards the Channel.
Did you act in the lead capacity?
Yes.
For a squadron or a group?
For quite a few of the missions. We became a lead crew after our 4th mission. As a lead crew, there was some extra training, local training, and extra work for the bombardier and the nav to take care of us, so that they could do whatever was necessary as far as navigation, and especially the bombardier with the bomb sights, just in 3-ship trail.
3-ship trail.
Then after bombs away, you got a rally point.
Right.
And so you all headed for that, either geographically or some other way. You all knew where the rally point was, and you headed for there, for the rally point, formed up, and then headed back towards England.
Resumed the normal formation.
Yeah, you wanted to be in formation because that was your primary protection. The MEs, ME-109s were always looking for single airplanes, lone airplanes, maybe 2 or 3 together or something like that. Those were their favorite targets. But
was there any change in speed or altitude when you came off the bomb run to get out of town, so to speak?
No, same. We didn't have very much speed differential in level flight with the B-24 or the B-17 bombers. There was maybe 10 or 15 miles an hour, but it wasn't good practice. We never tried to. Our bombing run was at 155, and that's what our rally was, at 155, and that's what we came home as.
Where did most of the flak occur? Before, or during, or after the bomb run?
All of the above.
All of them.
There was always flak crossing the Channel. Always. Until the invasion, then those guns went away.
So you run into flak that early in the flight?
Yeah, and the Germans had flak guns, anti-aircraft guns mounted on railroad cars.
What was it like to fly through the flak field?
Just sit there and endure. You couldn't maneuver. You had to stay in formation, and you just wanted to get to the target, get those bombs away, make your turn to the rally point. I don't know, I can't think of one good word except it was apprehension.
What did it look like?
Well, I think I noted here that your long view or your distant view of flak is black. Well, when it's inside your formation, it's bright orange and red, and you can hear it. That's the uncomfortable part about that, is that you can't maneuver, you can't avoid. You're just hoping that don't get hit. And of course, a lot of airplanes, like one mission, our left wingman was there, and then he wasn't. It was the job that had to be done.
You bombed mostly industrial and seaport.
Yeah,
And of course,
industrial complexes.
you had an involvement on D-Day.
D-Day,
Yeah.
the first mission was bombing the beaches, because the landings were at 6:30. That's when they started.
Go from the time that you were alerted for D-Day, just exactly what happened through the whole day.
For D-Day, we all knew it was coming. You couldn't even guess when, and how's it going to be handled. Well, we were a lead crew at that time. We were briefed at 6 o'clock at night, the night before, about what was going to happen on the 6th of June, what our mission was, what our target was. And I can always remember the briefing officer, if either one of you make one goddamn word about where you're going, you're dead. And of course we didn't want to spread the word around at all. We just knew that, okay, this was, like I said, the first mission was to bomb the beaches. And we had different parts of the beaches to each group or squadron or what have you, at different parts of the, all the way from over near the Pas-de-Calais over to the Cherbourg Peninsula. We turned around to go back across the channel. On our way over, it wasn't completely undercast, but we couldn't see much of the water. But by the time we had dropped our bombs and began our return, the visibility of the channel and was much better, and we could see what it was like down there. It was just one mass of ships. That's all you could see. You could hardly see the water.
You walk on them.
Yeah, that's right. And once, especially on D-Day, after we debriefed, they said, well, go ahead and get some sleep, but you'll probably be called out again. And on the second mission, the targets were inland, railroad marshalling yards, highway, busy highways, and the purpose of that was to damage the transportation system, to keep the Germans from reinforcing very much. Then turn around and head back home.
When you came back, just how did they approach the field and land? Was there a procedure for that?
You know, we came over the runway in squadron formation, and the low squadron would start its peel off. That would be 9 or 12 airplanes, and the rest of the squadron, squadrons of the group would make a 360 and come back over the runway, and then the next squadron would peel off, and then the next squadron would peel off.
So disabled aircraft had priority then?
Oh, yes.
When you first came over?
Disabled and injured on board.
Injured on board.
Yeah, you have different colored flares for that, to let them know. But if you had injured on board, that was the #1 priority.
As lead crew, did you have any recognition for being lead crew when it comes to promotions and things like that?
Well, as a lead pilot, I was promoted earlier than a lot of the other. I was promoted from first lieutenant to captain at an early time. Mm-hmm. And a lot of the aircraft commanders or pilots finished all of their missions as first lieutenants. But if you were a lead crew, like I was, I was a captain.
And you flew right up to the end of the cessation of hostilities?
No, I did not. I flew my last mission on the 24th of December, 1944.
Christmas Eve?
Yes, that's right, Christmas Eve.
About that, 44.
There was still a lot of fighting going on.
How many missions did you have?
30.
You stayed in the theater, or you returned stateside?
I returned to stateside. I was back in the States within 2 weeks.
Had to leave your aircraft there, or did you fly back?
I didn't have an aircraft. I came back by ship.
You recall
Like I
anything?
said, I was back in the States within 2 weeks. I was on board that ship within about 6 days, something like that. That was, and the ship itself was the former USS Manhattan, which was a busy passenger liner before the war started.
Luxury.
The Coast Guard operated it and was renamed the USS Wakefield. But coming back from Europe, the ship wasn't fully loaded at all with people. Most of the people on board the ship that I was on board were German PWs. We had about 300 or 400 of those on board.
Once you come back stateside, what transpired then? Did you go home? You get a break?
I went home. Like I said, we came back by ship. We landed in New York, and I forget exactly what the routine was, but it was very quick. We came to New Jersey. I forget the exact area. Did some quick processing orders and leave.
Camp Kilmer?
So I was home on, I forget it was about 2 or 3 weeks leave, and then I reported to my stateside assignment.
Where was that?
That was at Nashville, Tennessee.
Nashville.
Was a B-24 training base
Well,
right outside of Nashville.
they were still putting crews together and training in the 24 there.
Yeah. I was training the crews. Now I had completed my combat, and now I was a pilot instructor.
You stayed at Nashville for how long?
Probably about 4 or 5 months, and then the war was over, or the armistice was signed, and I opted for release.
Were you still single then?
No, I was married then.
You married after you returned from
Yeah.
from Europe.
Yeah. No, I married before I went overseas.
Oh.
My young wife had delivered our first child in January, and I decided that if I want to be the proper parent, if I can, I will separate, stay in the reserves. I got married when I was in B-24, what we call phase training, or combat crew training, and that was in Tucson, Arizona. And then after, when I came back, my wife, or when I landed in New York, my wife had delivered our first child, a boy by the name of, we named him Roger.
You subsequently you had more children?
Yes, we had 2 more, another boy and a daughter.
So, shortly after World War II, the Korean fracas broke out. What happened then?
I was recalled. I'd stayed in the reserves, and I was recalled to active duty.
And what type of assignment did you have then?
I was assigned to MATS at that time, which is the Military Transport Service.
And what type of aircraft were you operating?
C-97
Okay.
was the transport airplane.
I know you had a pressurized airplane now.
Oh, yes.
That had to have been a big change from the B-24.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Well, the C-97 was the outgrowth of the B-29.
Right.
Originally it had the same engines, but the lower part, there was a double-deck airplane. The lower deck of the C-97 was the same size as the fuselage on a B-29, and then they built the big passenger deck on top of that.
And cargo and passenger mission?
Cargo and passenger and aerovac.
Aerovac too?
Oh yeah, aerovac, yes.
Oh,
I can specifically remember one aerovac flight out of Tokyo. That was at I wasn't at Haneda, but we were flying out of Tokyo International at that time, and there was the operation. What was, as I recall, it was called Operation Little Switch. We exchanged POWs between North Korea and the U.S. So one mission, or an important mission out of Tokyo, was with the first repatriated Korean passengers. You never saw such a happy bunch of guys in all your life. They've been through some medical screening, and they've probably been out of North Korea for 4 or 5 days or something like that. And then I think we had 55 patients on board. About half of them were litter patients. Some of them they were all in terrible shape, skinny, and just what I remember is they were so happy to be on board that airplane. I think we had about 4 or 5 flight nurses on board.
Did you transition to anything else?
Well, I flew, I forget exactly, I flew the 118 for a little while, and I was in the training command, and I flew nav training missions in the T-29, which was the twin-engine Convair, and then was also what called, there was a passenger airvac airplane, a 131, and then I transitioned from those airplanes to the C-141.
You were assigned to a MAC base or a MATS?
Yes, came to McGuire.
That's back when we were Military Airlift Command.
That's right, yeah.
Back. Okay. And you were with what squadron, do you recall here?
30th Squadron was the squadron I flew with.
The 30th. Okay. That would have brought you into the busy time of our involvement with Vietnam.
Yeah.
So the 141 supported a lot of flights out of here to...
Yeah, I was never assigned full-time, or I never had an assignment in country, but I was in country at least once a month, sometimes twice a month. And a lot of the guys wanted to get in at least once a month because you know what happened. You had a deduction from your income tax in the combat zone.
Combat zone, yeah. But
and those were pretty long missions. You go from McGuire, probably unload someplace in the States, and probably up to McCord, then across over to Japan, and crew rest, and then come on back.
you spent more time in the air than you did at home.
Oh yes, a lot more time.
Yeah.
Yep.
You recall your last duty mission?
It was in June of '77.
And that was just when you were going to retire from active,
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
active duty. Yeah. Well, was there something special about that particular?
Well, on my last operational mission, I had both of my sons with me on board the airplane.
As what, additional crew members?
Well, my co-pilot was my youngest son, and he was stationed at Norton, flying 141s.
Okay.
And my oldest son, Roger, was stationed at Dover, and he was an aircraft commander on C-5s. So we let him sit in the seat for a little while once in a while. But we were crew resting in Torrejon, and Roger found himself a C-5 that he could get on board and come back home on. So Rich and I, my youngest son, we had...
So that last mission wasn't just off the ground and around the flagpole and come back.
No,
it was a bona fide...
It was an operational mission.
Operational mission.
I was my duty assignment at that time was was in the 21st Air Force.
Well, that's quite an accomplishment in and of itself.
Oh yes,
to have
that's
your
right.
sons
Yeah. And I can remember we landed at, in Germany, we landed at Frankfurt. And there was, somehow or other, the word had been spread that there's a family on board the piloting and so the Stars and Stripes reporter and a couple of other newspapers met us at the airplane. And,
It's amazing what a telephone conversation is.
yeah, that's right. Yeah. Anyway, that was a great time.
Yeah, that's very good.
Easily remembered.
When you consider all that you've done since then, after retirement, you basically established the retiree community here.
Well, I was in the first group that really got the retiree activities program functioning like we thought it needed to function. The retiree activities program started out initially at the Air Force Personnel Center as a desk in the personnel section. I felt that there needed to be more attention paid to the retired community, and I had commanders that felt the same way, and we got the retiree activities volunteer program on the road and manned the offices and helped the active duty people take care of the needs of the retired community.
You've been doing that for 38 years.
Yes, that's right. Yeah. It was something that I felt very strongly about. Let's find what we can do for the retirees, and the retiree activities program is actually established by an Air Force directive.
Would it be correct to say that the program is uniformly administered throughout the Air Force?
It is now, yes. Yep.
That's good. That's good. And you were quite instrumental in that, I'm sure.
Yep. Well, right now there's around 90 retiree activities offices throughout the Air Force. Almost every base has a retiree activities office.
That's a wrap.
That's the end of the
Just
input.
want to take one picture using my camera here.